This is a timeline of the entire book of Genesis. This first book of the Bible is made up of a series of events that seem pretty bizarre and random on their own. But when you add them all together, they actually form one story about two choices God offers every person on earth. Let's find out what these two choices are as each event in the story appears on the timeline. Starting with chapter 1. Genesis begins with God creating 3 different realms in 3 days: light, water and sky, and the dry land. Then filling these realms, each with a different ruler the following 3 days: the stars to rule the heavens, the fish and birds to rule the water and sky, and the animals to rule the land. But then God created a creature who would rule more than just one realm. The Bible says that God made humans in His image. But this doesn't mean that God has arms and legs. It has to do with God's reason for creating the humans. God told man and woman to multiply and rule the entire world. They were given the responsibility of representing and ruling all the creatures of all 3 realms on God's behalf. To be made in God's image is to be made for the purpose of representing the image of God on the earth. This was God's original plan for the earth, which is why He rested the 7th day. The world was at peace. But one of these creatures wasn't too excited about being ruled by the humans. This creature was more than just a snake. This was the spiritual rebel you know as Satan, and he convinced the humans to rebel against God. But not only did this rebellion lead to the entire world and Satan being cursed, it's going to lead to one of the most creepy stories in the entire Bible that 99% of Christians have never been taught in church. The humans are cast out of God's presence, but not before God makes a promise to them. He says that the humans are going to have a righteous son who will one day crush the rebel snake Satan, but not without Satan bruising his heel. Strange promise. But this is just the first of 3 big promises God makes to the humans in the book of Genesis. One of them has already been fulfilled, the other one is being fulfilled as I speak, and the last one will be fulfilled in the future. I'll explain more later, but for now, let's move to the next event on our timeline. The man and woman have 2 sons, Cain and Abel, who grew up hearing about how their mom and dad used to live in God's presence before the whole snake incident happened. They used to be able to physically walk and talk with God. But since Cain and Abel couldn't physically do that, they decided to show their love for God in a different way, by offering gifts. Their parents must have been so proud. I wonder if they thought maybe one of these sons will be the righteous son who crushes the evil snake like God promised. But something else happened instead. The Bible says that God gazed upon Abel's gift, but not Cain's. This infuriated Cain so much that he killed his brother out of jealousy. Cain was supposed to rule over his evil impulses, but instead, he let the evil control him. Just like his parents were supposed to rule over the snake, but instead they let the snake take control. But God showed mercy on Cain and let him live, despite his evil actions. Cain's family grew and became more and more evil until 8 generations later, the unthinkable happened. I actually can't believe this is in the Bible because it's one of the most creepy things you'll probably ever hear in your entire life. Parents, be advised. The Bible says that not only was the wickedness of mankind great in the earth, but so was the wickedness of the sons of God. This phrase is a reference to angels in the Old Testament. As mankind multiplied, so did the women, and these angels wanted them for themselves. So they took them as wives and had babies together. I told you it was gonna get weird. But as you might imagine, these weren't your everyday newborn cuddle bugs. The Bible calls these angel-human hybrids Nephilim, and they grew to be fierce giants. This is interesting because some of the oldest non-biblical texts in the world also talk about these giants, like one from ancient Mesopotamia that describes a giant man named Gilgamesh who was half man, half god, and built a great empire. These ancient empires make these Nephilim sound like heroes, but the Bible describes these giant warriors as being part of the great evil in the world at the time. So why were these Nephilim giants such an abomination to God? Aside from the fact they wanted to exalt themselves like gods, one other reason might have to do with the promise God made to the humans at the beginning, that one day, one righteous human son would crush Satan's evil rebellion. These Nephilim were a distortion of God's plan for the human race, which is why he had to do something to save humanity before they completely destroyed themselves. And he used an ordinary, regular-sized man to do it. This story about Noah building a big boat to survive God flooding the entire earth with water is one that raises a lot of questions from both atheists and Christians. Like, how did all the animals fit in the ark? And how could one man build such a giant ship? Unlike how Noah's Ark is usually portrayed in kids' books, it actually would have looked like this. This is a life-size replica of what the good people over at the Ark Encounter believe it would have looked like. Based on the specifications given in the Bible, it would have been about the size of your average cargo ship today. Many scholars believe that Noah would have had about 55 to 75 years to build this massive ship. And nowhere does it say he couldn't have hired people to help him build it. Also, contrary to popular opinion, the Bible doesn't say that 2 of every animal was brought onto the ark. The Bible actually says that it was 2 of every animal after their kind. This means that Noah didn't have to bring both wolves and chihuahuas on board. He could have just brought 1 male and 1 female canine. But thanks to genetic mutation, the Chihuahua was able to return to the world many years after the flood. These animals also could have been babies, which is how they all would have easily fit in this massive ship. The Bible says that water came down from the sky and up from the ground, flooding the entire earth. God saved Noah and his wife, his 3 sons and their wives, and the animals. Most people don't know this, but one of Noah's sons is about to do something pretty horrible to his dad. And it's probably not what you were taught at Sunday school. But first, the floodwaters stop, and Noah offers a gift to God to thank him for saving him and his family. God had saved humanity, and he only required one thing of them: continue the task he had given the humans from the very beginning. Go reflect his image across the entire earth, which Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, started to do. In fact, the Bible says that all the nations of the world came from these 3 sons. For example, one of Ham's sons is literally named Mizraim, which means Egypt in Hebrew. But for some odd reason, one of Ham's other sons, Canaan, is cursed by God. I've always wondered why this son specifically was cursed. The truth is, this curse only makes sense when you understand what Ham did to his dad Noah. And it's probably not what you think. Again, parents be advised. Sometime after the flood, Noah had a little too much to drink and passed out naked. And the Bible says that Ham's son was cursed because Ham looked at his father's nakedness. Most would read this and think that Ham just happened to walk into the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's not exactly why his son was cursed. This phrase can also be a Hebrew idiom that means to sleep with someone else's wife. And Ham's dad Noah only had 1 wife. So, yeah. Why in the world would Ham do such a horrible thing, you might ask? Well, at the time, this would have been a way for Ham to signal to the family that he was the alpha male in charge. But if a son was born out of this shameful relationship, then it would make sense why that specific son would be cursed. Canaan would one day become a nation who God would have to deal with later. By the way, soon I'm going to be sending out a PDF of the complete timeline of the book of Genesis that you've seen in this video to everyone subscribed to the Visual Bible Club, my newsletter where I send short visual Bible studies directly to your inbox for free. Link in the description to sign up. But first, God has to deal with something else. Instead of these nations obeying God and filling the earth, they decide to do something else instead. They built a tower, which made God pretty upset. Many believe they have even found the location of where this tower was being built. But before we look at that, you need to know why God was so angry about this tall building. Scholars are agreed that this tower would have been an ancient ziggurat. This unique pyramid-like building can be found in just about every ancient civilization on Earth. which would make sense if every nation at one point in time was united in constructing this exact type of building. But check this out. Anytime a ziggurat has been found, the evidence always shows that it was used for only one thing, a temple for worship. But the nations building this particular ziggurat weren't interested in worshiping God. The Bible says that the people were building this tower to make a name for themselves. They were worshiping people rather than the one who created these people. And it's for this reason that God confused their language and scattered the nations. But then what happened to this giant ziggurat? Archaeologists like Joel Kramer believe they have found the exact location where this ziggurat used to be located. The Bible says that the place where this whole fiasco occurred was called Babel, which is where we get the name Babylon, which later became an empire located in the country of Iraq today.